was a point when Suge Knight wasn't just respected in hip-hop, he was flat out feared. His grip on Death Row Records was so tight that most people didn't even think about crossing him. But there was one man Suge could never shake, never intimidate, never stare down. 50 Cent. When 50 hit the scene, he came in like a storm. And suddenly that fear Suge used to command wasn't hitting the same anymore. By the time their paths crossed, Suge Knight had already lived a wild, high-pressure life that shaped his entire persona. Marion Hugh Knight Jr., born in Compton, grew up with the nickname Sugar Bear, which later evolved into the name the whole world knows, Suge Knight. He had the size and talent for football, and even though he didn't go pro, he didn't exactly slow down. He switched lanes fast, moving into concert promotion, and his huge build made him the perfect bodyguard for major celebrities, even working with Bobby Brown. That career shift put him right next to all the power, and he used every inch of it. But here's the thing, Suge didn't climb the industry ladder by playing nice. He built a rep off pressure, dominance, and making sure everyone around him understood exactly who was running the room. Artists, producers, even other label founders felt his presence, and not in a friendly way. He pushed people hard, and anyone who crossed him learned quick that Suge Knight wasn't someone you could test without consequences. The first artist to really feel that heat was Robert Van Winkle, better known as Vanilla Ice. Just a couple years after Suge stepped away from football and locked into the music industry, he launched his own music publishing company. Then in 1990, Vanilla Ice dropped Ice Ice Baby, a track you've definitely heard before because it went absolutely massive. The success was huge, but the behind-the-scenes story was even louder. Even though everyone associated the hit with Vanilla Ice, the song was actually written by Mario Johnson, who was signed to Suge Knight's agency at the time. And because of that connection, Vanilla Ice had to hand over a major cut of the profits to Suge. That move didn't just put money in Suge's pocket, it cemented his reputation as someone who would step into any situation and make sure he walked out with power, control, and a whole lot of leverage. This deal meant Vanilla Ice straight up signed over the royalties from the track to Suge Knight, but the journey to that point was wild. During those negotiation weeks, Suge pulled up on situation tense from the start. That pressure alone had people in the industry whispering all kinds of stories. One of the craziest rumors floating around back then claimed Suge forced his way into Ice's hotel room and hung him over the balcony by his ankles. For a long time, people didn't even question it because Suge's reputation made the story sound almost believable. But eventually, the only person who could settle it, the man in the middle, finally spoke up and shut it down himself. In 2001, Xenon Pictures dropped the documentary Welcome to Death Row, breaking down the rise and fall of the legendary label. The production team interviewed a ton of people connected to Suge, Death Row, or the whole scene around it. In one of those released interview clips, Vanilla Ice made it clear that the balcony story wasn't true. He said, "He didn't hang me off any balcony." Okay, the story's kind of been blown out of proportion, and I want to clarify that Suge and I have no bad feelings towards each other. Ice explained that Suge led him out onto the balcony to talk about the royalty mess. And even though he was shook, things never turned violent. Still, it's wild when you think about how many people were ready to take that rumor as pure fact just because of the image Suge had built up over the years. His name alone carried enough weight that anything extreme automatically sounded believable. That's how deep his influence ran in the industry during that era. By the time Death Row was rising in the 90s, Suge was already making serious moves on the West Coast, and through the DOC, he suddenly had access to members of one of the most legendary groups ever, NWA. That connection opened massive doors for him, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect. The DOC didn't just want out of NWA, he wanted out of their label too, Ruthless Records, which was run by Eazy-E. Breaking out of that contract and teaming up with Suge was about to be a tough mission, but the DOC had one major advantage on his side. And right around this same moment, Dr. Dre was dealing with his own frustrations, setting the stage for some of the biggest shifts hip-hop had ever seen. Dre wanted out too, and that's when Suge stepped in hard. Even though it was never officially proven, NWA's manager Jerry Heller claimed Suge threatened Eazy-E with lead pipes to force him into releasing the DOC and Dr. Dre from their contracts. Whether that story was true or not, Dre and DOC didn't fight it. They were ready to walk, ready to link up with Suge, and ready to build something new. That move is what turned them into the co-founders of Death Row Records. Before Death Row exploded, you've got to understand why Dr. Dre was even trying to escape NWA and Ruthless Records in the first place. This part matters because later on, Dre ends up playing a major role in the moment Suge and 50 Cent finally crossed paths. Back in 1987, Dre signed with Ruthless, and as the head of production, he carried the label on his back. He pushed out hit after hit, managing multiple projects at once, barely taking a break, and turning Ruthless into a powerhouse. But all that success came with a price, and Dre started feeling it heavy. He kept delivering, kept making money for the label, but he didn't feel like Eazy-E and Ruthless were taking care of him the same way. The idea of leaving the label seemed impossible, until Ice Cube showed everyone it was possible when he walked away in 1989. Once Cube left, Dre realized the door was open, and he didn't have to stay stuck anymore. That's when Suge and the DOC jumped in with the final push. They told Dre they had gone through the label's books with a lawyer and believed Jerry Heller and Eazy-E weren't treating Dre fairly. Hearing that gave Dre the confirmation he needed to finally cut ties. And just like that, Dre made the call. He left NWA and teamed up with Suge and the DOC to start something new and powerful. Dre and the DOC already had respect in the game and money to throw into building their own label, but Suge, he needed capital, and fast. And that's where that Vanilla Ice royalty situation came back into play. Suge took that money and used it to launch Death Row Records with serious momentum. Suge wasted no time putting the label to work. One of Death Row's first big moves was handling the music for the movie Deep Cover in 1992. And that track did more than just boost Dr. Dre. It introduced the world to his new protege, Snoop Dogg. That moment changed the entire sound of the West Coast. And not long after, Dre and Snoop locked in and started working on Dre's debut album, The Chronic, a project that would flip the whole industry upside down. The Chronic didn't just make noise, it flipped the entire industry upside down. It went triple platinum and pushed nearly 6 million copies around the world, turning Dr. Dre into a force nobody could ignore. Dre used the album to fire shots at Ruthless Records, call out Eazy-E, and put himself back on top, while Snoop Dogg used the moment to rise up as a superstar too. This project didn't just win, it put the whole West Coast on a different level. Then Death Row pushed things even further in 1993 when Snoop dropped his first solo album, Doggy Style, and that record went straight up quadruple platinum. It was praised everywhere, just like The Chronic, proving that Death Row had the hottest lineup in the country. But while the label was dominating the charts, Suge was also stepping into a lot of heat and starting new conflicts with people across the industry. During that same period, the mainstream spotlight was locked onto the gangster lifestyle portrayed in the music, and the pressure only grew after Snoop Dogg got charged with first-degree homicide around the time Doggy Style dropped. Things exploded even more when civil rights activist C. Dolores Tucker launched a full campaign against gangsta rap, aiming her anger directly at Time Warner because one of their subsidiaries distributed Death Row's music. Suge and his artists were furious, and Tucker only added more tension when she approached Suge asking him to release positive hip-hop music, whatever that was supposed to mean. Tucker even claimed she could convince Time Warner to put up $80 million to fund this new positive movement, but Suge wasn't having it. He rejected the entire idea, and the relationship between Tucker and the label became even more strained. Meanwhile, Suge's feud with the East Coast, especially with Sean Diddy Combs, was getting dangerously intense. Things got so serious that Combs reportedly needed bodyguards after receiving threats from street figures connected to Suge. With all this tension in the air, Death Row kept becoming more infamous by the day. Around this time, Suge set his sights on the biggest name in the game, Tupac Shakur. Pac was locked up in 1995, and rumor had it that his mother was close to losing her home, so Tupac's wife reached out to Suge in Los Angeles. Suge didn't hesitate. He wired Pac's mother $15,000 to help her out. A couple months later, Suge personally visited Pac in prison and paid his $1.4 million bail, and the unspoken agreement was clear. Tupac would sign to Death Row once he got out, and that's exactly what happened. When Pac joined the label, he went on a major run, dropping hits and fueling the rising East Coast versus West Coast battle. But I'm not diving deep into that battle here because the real turning point in this story, the part that eventually connects Suge and 50 Cent, comes from Dr. Dre and the decisions he made during this chaos. Even though Dre and Suge had built massive success together, Dre didn't like where things were heading. Suge couldn't stay away from conflict, and the constant fighting between the coasts was dragging Death Row's reputation into dangerous territory. Suge's behavior kept getting more unpredictable, and Dre felt that stepping away from the label might be the only way to protect himself and keep his future steady. Sure enough, Suge ended up getting arrested for violating his parole and was sent right back to prison. And while all that chaos was spinning around him, Dr. Dre finally broke away from Death Row in 1996 and started his own label, Aftermath Entertainment. It was still under Interscope just like Death Row, but Dre made it clear this was a fresh start, a whole new direction away from Suge and the problems that followed him everywhere. But Dre distancing himself came with serious consequences. Not only did he become Suge's enemy, but Tupac turned on him too. At first, Pac was excited about being with Death Row. He came in swinging, making hits and pushing the label's energy through the roof. But it didn't take long before he realized that working under Suge Knight wasn't the dream he hoped for. Pac brought in huge money, but the amount he actually saw compared to what the label pulled in was nowhere near fair, and that tension started eating at him fast. And then people around Pac started saying he wanted out of death row, but he felt stuck. On one hand, he owed Suge. Suge helped his mother keep her home and paid that massive $1.4 million bail that got Pac out of prison. On the other hand, Pac was drawn to the lifestyle he talked about, and being around Suge kept him close to that world. And beyond all of that, Pac was a loyal person. So when it came time to pick sides, he backed Suge, even if that meant turning on Dre without hesitation. Meanwhile, Dre was building something totally different with Aftermath. Unlike Death Row, where they pushed out hit after hit nonstop, Aftermath set itself up like a boutique label, focused on quality, not just flooding the market. Considering everything Dre went through at Ruthless and then at Death Row, this new approach made perfect sense. It didn't catch a smooth start. The label's first release, Dr. Dre Presents The Aftermath, dropped in November 1996, marking Dre's official shift away from gangster rap and the Coast beef. The project did get certified platinum by the RIAA, but fans didn't connect with it the way Dre hoped. And the next few years were even tougher. Aftermath released some serious flops and couldn't get any real traction. The industry started buzzing with rumors that Dre's new label was running low on cash and might not survive. But everything flipped in 1998. Jimmy Iovine, co-founder of Interscope and a close friend of Dre, told him to check out an insanely talented newcomer named Marshall Mathers. The world would soon know him as Eminem. Dre listened, saw the raw skill instantly, and didn't hesitate. He signed Eminem to Aftermath right away and went straight to work. The project they created became Eminem's debut LP, the Slim Shady LP. Dre was heavily involved, producing 3 tracks and jumping on vocals for 2. The album exploded, turning Eminem into a superstar almost overnight. It was wild, it was controversial, and it was a massive win for Aftermath. For the first time, Dre's label had a giant success that couldn't be denied. But the story didn't stop there, because that breakthrough set the stage for something even bigger. Someone Dre was about to bring into the picture who would change the entire game and eventually collide with Suge Knight in a way nobody saw coming. Dre came back hard when he dropped 2001, and the album went 6 times platinum, proving he still had the entire game in a chokehold. The sound, the production, the energy, it all showed the world that Dre wasn't washed up. He was still the mastermind everybody respected. As the album blew up, Aftermath's reputation skyrocketed, and those early struggles from the label's first years got buried fast. Even though Dre found himself tied up in a few lawsuits after that, Aftermath as a whole was thriving, and the label reached a whole new level in 2002 when 50 Cent entered the picture. Eminem was so blown away by 50's talent that he flew him out to Los Angeles to meet Dre in person, hoping to bring him onto the label the same way he was brought in. The moment Dre saw 50, he knew the guy had something special, so he signed him to a $1 million deal and immediately locked in on crafting his debut album. In February 2003, Aftermath released Get Rich or Die Trying, and the buzz around it was unreal. People were calling it the most hyped rap debut in a decade. The hype was real too, because the album exploded, selling nearly 900,000 copies in its first week and eventually going 9 times platinum by 2020. With numbers like that, 50 Cent instantly became one of the biggest names in music. And this was exactly when Suge Knight and 50 Cent crossed paths for the first time. And Suge quickly learned 50 wasn't someone he could intimidate. Between Tupac's passing and Suge's years in prison from 1996 to 2001, Death Row Records had fallen apart. Meanwhile, Dre and Aftermath were rising higher and higher, becoming Suge's biggest competition in the industry. And now, in 2002, 50 Cent was the hottest new force in hip-hop, and Suge decided he needed to meet him face-to-face. While 50 Cent was shooting the music video for his massive hit In Da Club, the whole atmosphere on set shifted the moment word spread that Suge Knight had arrived. Suge had always been known for his intimidating presence, but by this point, his image was even darker. Rumors were floating all over the industry linking him to Tupac's passing and also suggesting he had something to do with Biggie's unaliving too. None of it was ever proven, but the whispers alone made everyone nervous. With rumors like that following him everywhere, plus the reputation he already had, nobody wanted Suge showing up out of nowhere. D12's Bizarre happened to be there and witnessed the whole moment between 50 and Suge. Suge pulled up heavy, with almost 30 guys rolling with him, and he walked straight toward 50 with no hesitation. And just like that, most of 50's entourage quietly backed away, disappearing as Suge and his crew approached. And there were rumors that Eminem wanted to jump in and make sure his boy was safe when Suge pulled up, but he didn't even need to stress. 50 Cent didn't flinch for a second. He stepped straight toward Suge and his whole crew and asked him what he wanted, face to face, no fear at all. Suge didn't make a move. He just took a slow puff from his cigar and walked away without saying a word. The whole thing looked like an attempt to intimidate 50, but clearly it didn't work. And to this day, nobody really knows why Suge even showed up at that set. Some people say he thought Dre brought 50 in specifically to come after him, but one quick meeting showed Suge the truth. 50 Cent wasn't worried about him in the slightest, and once Suge dipped, 50 went right back to filming what would become one of the most iconic music videos ever made. But there was one thing Suge Knight didn't grasp before stepping to 50. 50 Cent had already survived situations way more intense than anything Suge could pull. He'd been through struggle, danger, and real-life chaos long before teaming up with Eminem and Dr. Dre. I'll get into that in a moment. But first, you gotta understand how Aftermath changed once 50 officially joined the team. The whole crew switched up their approach instantly. Everyone wore bulletproof vests, they moved with bulletproof cars, and the security became tight like military precision. They knew that signing 50 came with real tension, and they had to stay ready for anything that could happen at any moment. Like many artists who came from tough environments, 50 Cent, born Curtis Jackson, had a rough upbringing and faced real hardship growing up. His mother passed away when he was young, and after that he was raised by his grandparents, trying to navigate life without much support or guidance. By the time he reached his teenage years, he was already caught up in the street hustle, trying to survive and find his own path. Jackson later explained that during those years he was either focused on training at the gym or getting caught up in the street economy, trying to make money the only way he thought he could at the time. As he got older, the lifestyle didn't let up, and trouble eventually came his way. Right before his 19th birthday, Jackson was arrested after unknowingly dealing with an undercover officer, pushing him into a situation that could have easily taken years of his life away. He was facing the possibility of serious time, 3 to 6 years without question, but he ended up avoiding prison through a plea arrangement, giving him a second chance that many in his position never get. That second chance set the stage for everything that came next, his grind, his hunger, and ultimately the rise that made him one of the most unstoppable forces the rap world had ever seen. Instead of being sent to prison, Jackson was sent to a boot camp for 6 months where he earned his GED and finally had the space to think about his future. That time away pushed him to make a real change before life boxed him in for good. He chose the name 50 Cent as a symbol of transformation, a reminder that he was stepping into a new version of himself with a new mindset and a new direction. In 1996, a friend connected him with Jam Master Jay from Run DMC, and that moment changed everything. Jay recognized 50's hunger to build a music career, so he took him under his wing and taught him the essentials: how to make hooks hit hard, how to craft tight choruses, and how to shape a record from start to finish. Jay sharpened his skills in a way that gave 50 the foundation he needed to turn raw talent into something polished and powerful. I'm not going to go deep into every early track he made, but once he stepped into the industry as 50 Cent, he was catching the attention of all the right people. When he dropped the wild, controversial, and comedic single How to Rob, the entire rap world stopped and looked his way. Suddenly, he was Jay-Z, DMX, and Wu-Tang Clan. He even got invited to join Nas on the Nostradamus tour. But just as things were heating up, everything flipped fast because tragedy hit him head on. 50 Cent was shot 9 times at close range and left on the ground fighting for his life. He was hit in his hand, both legs, his chest, his hip, and even through his cheek. But somehow, he survived. Not only did he survive, he made a full recovery in just 5 months, something people still talk about to this day. The shooter was identified as Darryl Baum, a close friend and bodyguard of Mike Tyson. Though Tyson himself had absolutely nothing to do with the incident, the streets whispered that the hit was tied to Kenneth McGriff, someone people described as a powerful figure in the underground world who allegedly ordered the attack after 50 exposed details connected to him in a song. None of this was officially confirmed, but that was the rumor floating through the city at the time. After surviving a turbulent childhood and then surviving an attack designed to end his life, 50 Cent became the type of man nobody could shake. If end itself couldn't stop him, Suge Knight pulling up with cigars and a crowd of men had zero chance of making him sweat. And according to the talk behind the scenes, that wasn't even the only time they crossed paths. Word is, Suge rolled up another time with a group of guys who were clearly armed, trying once again to scare 50. But he wasn't moved at all. The story goes that 50 leaned back into his car, reached around, and revealed an Uzi he kept for protection. The moment was tense, but Suge backed down again, and right there, everyone watching realized the truth. The fear Suge once commanded wasn't hitting like before, and 50 Cent was the proof standing right in front of him. These encounters became a symbol of a much bigger issue Suge was facing. His reputation and credibility were crumbling fast. He spent only a short time out of prison before ending up back inside in 2003. Even behind bars, he still tried to pull strings, but he wasn't focused on rebuilding Death Row Records anymore. Instead, he poured his energy into launching smear campaigns against rappers he had issues with, especially Snoop Dogg, shifting the spotlight from power moves to bitter feuds. He even ended up cutting ties with Kurupt, one of the few people who had given Suge more chances than most would ever consider giving. Suge kept bouncing in and out of prison, pushing new artists and sparking fresh beefs, but even with all that chaos, Death Row couldn't put out a single solid album during this stretch. If you rewind the timeline a bit, the truth becomes clear. Death Row Records wasn't doing much to actually discover or develop new artists after Tupac passed. Once Pac was gone, the label survived off the massive profits from releasing 2 of his albums after his passing. And they spent years remixing and repackaging old Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg material from the early days. These moves brought in money for a while, but they were short-term plays, and none of it helped build the next generation of talent. Death Row wasn't creating stars anymore. It was just recycling its past. On top of that, the label's financial problems kept getting worse every time Suge Knight landed back in prison. His behavior grew more erratic and unpredictable, especially after his disastrous encounters with 50 Cent, and things only spiraled further. By 2006, everything hit rock bottom. Suge Knight and Death Row Records both filed for bankruptcy. At this point, Suge had spent more years behind bars than out, and Death Row didn't have any big artists, any major releases, or any real industry support left. When Suge filed for Chapter 11, he owed around $120 million in debt. His list of creditors was stacked: the IRS, Interscope Records, former artists, and a long list of people waiting to get paid. By then, it was clear. The legendary Death Row Records was officially finished. Suge spent the next several years falling deeper and deeper into trouble, but everything exploded in 2015. In January of that year, he crashed his truck into his friend Terry Carter, who tragically passed away, and also seriously injured filmmaker Clee Sloan. Suge claimed he acted in self-defense, but witnesses nearby said something very different. They claimed Suge followed both men from the set of Straight Outta Compton and intentionally ran them over. To keep it simple, the court didn't buy Suge's version of the story. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison, and as of now, he's sitting in R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego. He won't even be eligible for parole until October 2034, meaning he'll be in his 60s before he has any shot at freedom. Meanwhile, 50 Cent's path went in the complete opposite direction. Even though he never again reached the groundbreaking heights of Get Rich or Die Trying, he kept leveling up, expanding his influence into music, business, TV, and everything in between. And he managed to do it without ever being shaken by Suge Knight, the man who once controlled the entire West Coast. 50 Cent still remains a name everybody knows, no matter how much time passes. He's had his own problems over the years. He even filed for bankruptcy at one point. But he bounced back strong, rebuilt his brands, and even hit the Super Bowl halftime stage like a legend. His story became one of survival, reinvention, and staying sharp in an industry where most people fade away fast. Suge Knight, on the other hand, built his entire power off intimidation and connections, using fear as his main tool. That attitude helped him rise, but it also guaranteed that his time at the top wouldn't last forever. People got tired of the threats, tired of the chaos, tired of walking into rooms wondering what he might do next. And sooner or later, someone was bound to stare him down without blinking. That someone was 50 Cent. 50 was fresh to the mainstream, but he wasn't new to pressure or danger, not even close. Suge thought he'd be easy to shake, just another newcomer with something to lose, but he wasn't dealing with an ordinary man. Their run-ins showed Suge something he hadn't seen in a long time. A person who didn't move, didn't fold, didn't care about his tough guy act at all. And once that became clear, Suge's whole image started cracking. Their brief interactions marked the turning point. From there, Suge's life unraveled. He lost control of his label, lost the influence he once demanded, lost the respect he spent years forcing out of people, and eventually ended up behind bars with no real way back. Meanwhile, 50 kept doing his thing, building his name, expanding his empire, and making sure people remembered him for success, not fear. In the end, Suge Knight realized the truth. 50 Cent was built different, and nothing he tried could shake him. That's exactly why Suge was scared, because 50 wasn't playing his game, and he couldn't control him, pressure him, or break him. And that's the story of how a man who once ruled the West Coast met someone he simply couldn't intimidate. And that's the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to share the video too, and I'll see you on the next one.